My name is Justin LeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And today we're talking about one of the most famous women martial artists to ever appear on screen, Cynthia Rothrock.
The inspiration for the character of Sonya Blade in the Mortal Kombat franchise. And also, the only, I think, white female martial arts star to become big in Hong Kong movies. She is in one or two, certifiable Hong Kong classics. She's in Sammo Hung's Millionaire's Express, and she's in Yes, Madam, probably the most famous, girls fighting Hong Kong martial arts movie of all time, where she co-starred with Michelle Yeoh. She's also in a lot of, kind of direct-to-video crap. I say that with affection.
As a performer, she's someone that didn't make it big in America and go to Hong Kong. Her story of how she got there is really interesting in that she was an award-winning martial arts performer, not in combat, but in forms. So weapons forms, different styles. You can find videos online of her doing snake style and stuff like that. And she was doing it at a time when there wasn't even a women's category. She actually had to perform in the male category because that's all that there was. And she kept winning. And the story goes that Seasonal Films, who made a bunch of Hong Kong style productions in America, were looking for the new Bruce Lee. So that was In Sing Yung, the guy who discovered and gave Jackie Chan his big break with Drunken Master and Snake and the Eagle's Shadow, and Kur Yun, who would go on to direct Yes, Madame. They did a bunch of auditions for Bruce Lee types, and she showed up with a friend, and they were like, "We don't want to see any women," but because you're here, fine, you can perform. And they performed, and they were so impressed that we want her, sign her to a contract. And the funny story about that is they then did nothing with her until she appeared on the cover of a bunch of magazines, and a local news station did a little segment on her that ended with her going, "Hong Kong, I'm coming for you." Sammo Hung saw that and went, "Wait, who is this person? You have them signed? Bring her to Hong Kong so she can be in Yes, Madame."
Now, Cynthia Rothrock, like a lot of martial arts stars, I wouldn't say that she has a movie that's the defining masterpiece. Her career, her impact is in scenes scattered throughout movies. We each watched a few of her movies this week, but I think I probably had the best time revisiting famous moments on YouTube. I didn't watch Millionaire's Express again this week, but I did watch her fight with Sammo Hung. And I mean, that's a classic fight. And all you have to do to sort of understand why she's worth watching and worth thinking about is to look up one of those fights on YouTube. She's a very unique presence in a fight scene. A lot of kung fu stars, I guess, are men of a certain height, 5'6", 5'7". I think Bruce Lee was 5'7", Sammo is 5'7". Cynthia Rothrock is just over 5 feet tall. And I'm trying to figure out and articulate why that makes such a difference, because it does.
Well, when she kind of goes up against a big hulking man like Dick Wei in Yes, Madame, and she holds her own against him, it makes her feel that much more powerful, because it seems like the David and Goliath thing, right? It's not like a big muscular guy beating up a bunch of innocent henchmen. It's a smaller person being able to perform all of this stuff for an audience.
She's incredibly compact. She's amazing at doing spinning kicks where her whole body seems to go around in one smooth, tight motion. She can kick very high. She can do a backflip with seemingly no effort. I mean, look at the fight between her and Sammo in Millionaire's Express. There's an amazing moment in it where she kicks him, he grabs her foot, and then, I'm not quite sure how to describe this, but she propels her whole body counterclockwise, while her other foot's in his hand, to try to kick him over the head with her foot. She's so small that all of her moves seem to encompass her whole body in a very smooth and tight way.
We should point out, though, that when you watch her movies, you will see people doubling for her when there's any big acrobatics or stunts. And she's been very candid about that, saying, I'm a martial artist. Like, I am not a stunt person. I am not going to throw myself like 4 stories off of something. I'm scared of heights, so I'll just let them do that. And in some of the movies, like Yes, Madame or Righting Wrongs, you can see the stuntman. Often it's Yung Bio with like eyeliner on and like a Cynthia Rothrock wig just to double for her. And Another issue I would say with even like these classic films, and the reason that you would go, I wouldn't recommend all of them, is that you get the sense that the producers are going, people don't want to watch a whole film with women as the stars. And that is a problem that people like Cynthia Rothrock faced at the beginning of her career and, near the middle, near the end in Hong Kong and North America. Instead of just like making, a Jackie Chan film where it would be all about Jackie Chan, it's Cynthia Rothrock and Michelle Yeoh, two like charismatic dynamos pushed off to the side to make way for like three bumbling comedic guys why would I watch these people? It's so boring.
Well, you would watch it because one of them is the great filmmaker Choi Hark, doing shenanigans and shtick. But I do agree with you. One thing I would point out is that Michelle Yeoh is obviously a great actress. Mm-hmm. Cynthia Rothrock, there are some martial arts movie stars where the personality and the charisma is as important as the fighting skills. I think Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan are both examples of that. Like, you watch their movies as much to spend time with them as you do to see them fight. I don't think this is the case with Cynthia Rothrock. I think she's a fighter first, foremost, and maybe even only. First of all of those Hong Kong movies were shot without sound, and she didn't even speak Cantonese.
And she's dubbed by somebody else. And we should be pointed out that Jackie Chan was also dubbed by somebody else until the 90s.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, that's insane to me to spend all that time and then some like nobody comes in and just does your voice. If you look at her in Yes Madame and like the few films she did after that, I would say that she's at like her purest form. She's at the coolest. It's fun to just watch her do her thing and just act like just the look they have for her, which is like pure 80s. And then in the 90s, as it goes along, she starts to resemble more like a parent who's going and doing this kind of stuff.
Well, in the 90s too, though, she does some more sexy movies. Like she becomes a bit more of a, especially in the American type stuff. Some of them get a little more Skinamax-ish. You watched one of those this week.
Yeah, I did. Sworn to Vengeance, I think it was called, and that movie was not good. And unfortunately, Cynthia Rothrock says it's one of her favorites because she was an associate producer on it. She felt she had some manner of creative control. She brought in a Hong Kong action person you would not know watching the movie. And the movie is almost a great example of America just not knowing what to do with somebody like Cynthia Rothrock. Oh, she's a woman, right? So we need to make her like sexy and have a bunch of sex scenes because that's all really women can do. I mean, she says that throughout her career, she fought tooth and nail that she would not appear topless in movies, and that every American production she did, they were like, you have to appear topless. And she's like, no. Like, they even tried to trick her a few times, and she said, it's in my contract that I will not do it. And they even tried to do stuff like, oh, we won't show your breast, but take your top off. And so she wore, like, giant pasties on set, and they're like, whoa, what's that? And she went, well, if you're not going to see it, it doesn't make any difference, right? They're like, ah, shit. And, American films, we'll get into this probably even more, they just didn't know what to do with her because there was no market that would be able to exploit her skills in the best way. You go back to like something like Righting Wrongs, which I would argue is her best overall film, and you have her skills at like their max power there.
Wow, I loved Righting Wrongs. I'd never seen it before. It was also released as Above the Law. I believe the Weinstein's Dragon Dynasty company put it out as Above the Law.
Which is the only time I've ever seen it called Above the Law. Ever since I got into Hong Kong cinema, it's always been Righting Wrongs.
But it's primarily a vehicle for Yuen Biao, who is one of the three like Cantonese opera guys. Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, Yuen Biao were the three brothers growing up. And I feel like Yuen Biao, like, he's the least popular of the three, which is why I have some big gaps in my Yuen Biao knowledge. But
I was a Yuen Biao super fan right away when I got into Hong Kong cinema, because I guess I just gravitated to the underdog status that he had.
I mean, he's amazing. He may be the best athlete of the three. I mean,
both of them would say that he was the best athlete of all of them, and that he was so well-rounded because he could do so many acrobatics himself.
So I was blown away by this movie Righting Wrongs when I finally saw it this week, because it has some scenes in it that I think are as good as anything that's ever come out of Hong Kong.
I mean, you have Yuen Biao working at his full power. You have Ko Yun behind the camera, the director of Yes Madame, just going all out. And yes, Cynthia Rothrock, I would argue, at her most charismatic, like, Ko Yun knows what to do with her. She's introduced in a great fight scene at a gaming den, and she does this thing where, like, she uses handcuffs to put them all together. And so she's doing like flips, she's moving out of the way, and it's the perfect use of her as an actor and a performer. This kind of like complicated thing that doesn't necessarily need to emphasize power, but uses all of her martial arts skills. And she has a big indoor fight with Yung Biao that is just crazy. Everyone is doing flips all over the place. And Rothrock said that Biao was the best performer that she ever did a fight scene with.
You know, I think I like Cynthia Rothrock best as an actor when she is acting like she fights, you know, very compactly and directly. Millionaire's Express is good for that, you know? She gives a very no-frills performance in that. It's basically all about the fighting, and she's very deadpan. Why don't we talk a little bit about her big American movie, China O'Brien, directed by Enter the Dragon's Robert Klaus.
The man who became the torchbearer for, what, there's a new martial artist that could be a star, give them to me, and I will king them.
Yeah, he did, for example, Jackie Chan's attempted American big break, Battle Creek Brawl.
He did Jim Kelly's Black Belt Jones.
There was a Bolo Yeung film called, what's that one called? Ironheart?
Oh, did he direct that as well?
Oh, and who could forget that he also did Gymkata with Kurt Thomas, which combined the thrill of karate with the skill of gymnastics.
Now, China O'Brien, its biggest issue is that you feel the filmmakers kind of like shrug their shoulders and go, well, I don't know what to do with Cynthia Rothrock, so I guess we'll just put her in a generic pot boiler where she returns to her hometown and does like a Walking Tall where she takes control again.
Yeah, I mean, this movie could not be more generic. She's a former big city cop. She goes back to her rural hometown, and yeah, like Buford Pusser before her, she sees that the town is in the pocket of this corrupt gangster, and her father is the sheriff, and he gets taken out by the gangster, so she decides to run for mayor of the town, and that puts her in great danger. Along for the ride is the great Richard Norton, another Guilo in Hong Kong, who plays her high school sweetheart and also her current paramour.
And you could not get more boring fighting if you tried in this movie. Like, American stuntmen going, yeah, this is fighting, I guess, right? They just like throw slow motion punches and kicks at each other.
Robert Klaus's fight scenes are always so basic. I mean, in this movie, it's like, okay, you got two people in a gym, and he parks the camera down and they do a bunch of kicks and punches, and maybe they use some gym equipment. And I mean, God love Robert Klaus. He definitely seems to have appreciated the martial arts. And like more than a lot of American filmmakers, he seems to have understood each of the martial artists he works with and understood their individual appeal and tried to tailor his films around their personalities. Well, compare it to a movie like Blonde Fury, which we both watched this week, which is one of her Hong Kong movies. Not a very good movie, but there's a scene towards the end of that where she's fighting a bunch of guys on a giant net. And she's like propelling her body through the holes of the net and twisting herself around, and she's pushing other people through the net. There are whole new dimensions of space being explored in a Hong Kong fight scene. The Hong Kong fight choreographers really think about how can we use a space to its best advantage, and I don't think Robert Klaus ever did.
And I wonder, like, when Cynthia Rothrock was doing all of these American films, like all the ones she did in the 90s and beyond, was she on set with Richard Norton and like looking at each other and going, oh man, this is not good compared to what we were doing in Hong Kong. Like, we can look at the examples on screen and stuff like Yes Madame, or, you know, Richard Norton's City Hunter, or Magic Crystal, which they were both in, which was a Wong Jing family film. And you look at those fight scenes and you're like, oh yeah, that's the best. And then you're on the set of China O'Brien and you're like, okay, so I'll punch the guy, he'll duck, maybe I'll do like a little feint at some Jackie Chan stuff, but in slow motion. And were they sad? Or were they like, I am so happy that we don't have to do what we were doing in Hong Kong, where we feared for our life every day? Like, if you look at interviews with her, and she talked about those Hong Kong films, she is very open with the fact that, like, she was constantly hurt. She got hurt so bad that she couldn't use her good side anymore, doing stunts, that, you know, the stunt choreographers, they would push them so hard until they just couldn't do it anymore. As little as she is in Yes Madame, she shot that movie for 7.5 months. That is insane.
My God. I think we've told this on the podcast before, but you remember that time when we went to see Donnie Yen speak and he talked about, what was that movie he did early in his career, that kind of like dance movie?
Mismatched Couple.
There was a stunt in that movie where he was supposed to just like throw himself at top speed against a brick wall. And everybody on the set was saying, I think you're going to get hurt if you do this. And he says, no, don't worry. And he was saying, yeah, 30 years later, I still feel that.
Yeah, he says that he can't sleep on that side on anything soft because he's just in pain all the time.
Oh my God.
I was listening to Cynthia Rothrock talk about her role in No Retreat, No Surrender 2, Raging Thunder. And even beyond like the martial arts scene, she said they were doing a scene on train tracks in Thailand. And the director's like, all right, don't worry. We have a stunt person. He's listening for a train. And if it comes, just find a nook in the mountain that you can press up against and it can go by. And it actually happened and they had to do it. They had to find a nook and like go up against because it was an elevated platform. And just like the train was like a few inches from their face as it just blew by.
Unbelievable.
So you see her American stuff and maybe she's like, I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to go home at night. I am not in a hotel for the like length of this film. And while I may not be creating like amazing action, at least I'm safe and I don't feel like I'm going to die every day.
I think we both dipped into some of her more obscure work this week. I watched a movie called Manhattan Chase from 2000, which I watched because it is the final film of Godfrey Ho, the cut and paste king. And I thought, well, it's this week or never.
And it's one of his rare non-cut and paste pictures where you probably watched the American version that it's all Lauren Avedon and Cynthia Rothrock together just talking for most of the picture.
Yeah, and Cynthia Rothrock comes in and out. She's quite good when she appears. Like even a movie like this will have some like pretty solid punches and kicks thrown in it. But oh my God, I mean, just such a boring film. And anyway, Godfrey Ho like shot it on the fly in New York. So there are lots of scenes that just unfold in like this one parking lot beneath the Brooklyn Bridge on the Brooklyn side. So you see Manhattan in the background, you know, but you don't see a lot of actual Manhattan in the movie because it's hard to film on the fly in there.
It's more like Brooklyn Chase featuring Manhattan more than anything else.
There's a scene towards the end where there's like a big chase in Central Park where the villain is on roller skates and Cynthia Rothrock is following him on a motorized scooter. And I thought, really? A motorized scooter?
You want to be like, if she'd only been giving more chances in America, people that understood what she could do. But the reality is, there was nobody there that understood or could do anything with her because they did not grasp the way that action should be shot, aka the Hong Kong style. You know, you look at places like China or even Japan, and they have stars like you mentioned, Michelle Yeoh, Moon Lee, Cynthia Khan, Yukari Oshima. Like, they know what to do with women action performers and how to shoot it. And that's the frustrating thing is that you look at like Chuck Norris, like he is a block of wood. Compared to Chuck Norris, Cynthia Rothrock is like Marlon Brando. But Chuck Norris kept being able to make way more action pictures than she did. Because you always get the feeling that people were like, a woman, let's put her with another guy like Chad McQueen. Yeah, in Martial Law. It's like this guy with like a big beer belly and it's like, we need this guy to anchor the picture. Cynthia, you'll be a supporting character. And, you know, like any action performer, she started in the mid-'80s. By, like, the early 2000s, she cannot do the stuff that she could do in Hong Kong anymore. And she was trapped on the American market. So she became more of a, like, it's just happy to see her in these films. And she befriended people like David Dakota and appeared in stuff like Santa's Summer Cabin.
She's also in Mercenaries, the Fred Olen Ray Expendables ripoff, which has Vivica A. Fox and Zoe Bell, I think.
How dare you, Will? Fred Olen Ray? Don't you mean Chris Olen Ray, his son?
Oh, shit. Okay, my apologies.
She got together with like Jahal Murray, Canada's very own director of martial arts films and stuff like Tiger Claws. So there's a lot of stuff out there, especially in the 90s, that's like very generic and will all blend together in your mind with titles like Rage and Honor Part 2. I mean, obviously stuff like China O'Brien was successful enough because she did do a China O'Brien 2 that was directed by Robert Klaus. So it's like there was an audience that was hungry for stuff that she could do, but she was just stuck with people who didn't know how to do it in the best way.
But I recommend for the curious to go down a YouTube rabbit hole of the best Cynthia Rothrock fights, and then also check out her own YouTube channel. That's right, Cynthia Rothrock is a vlogger now, and she has a series of videos where she talks about the making of her most popular movies, and talks about what nightmare horror shows they were.
Yes. I'm surprised she doesn't have like terrible PTSD talking about some of them. Like the fact that like the famous famous shot in Yes Madame where she like jumps back up and she does the splits and she's up against the wall, that she wanted to not complain and she stayed in that position for hours and like the next day she could not walk anymore. Or that at one point she got punched in the nose and Corion is like, you look better that way. Her nose is all like red and like big.
Oh my God. Well, Cynthia Rothrock, if you're listening, thank you for sacrificing yourself for your art like that.
I would recommend do a triple bill of The Millionaire's Express, great movie, Righting Wrongs, excellent, and Magic Crystal, super fun as well. Richard Norton and Cynthia Rothrock taking on Andy Lau with action choreographed by the director of Super Fights. What's not to like? It's great stuff.
So, Justin, do we have any letters this week?
We do have some letters. As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, whatever. Our first letter goes, "Hi, folks. Just wanted to reach out to say I'm a big fan of the show and congratulate you on doing such a good job. Please take a moment to appreciate me writing this on the week Will Sloan trashed two of my favorite directors on the two different podcasts, Spielberg and Wes Anderson. And yes, I know trash is a little hard, but you get the point."
I did. First of all, I said that Spielberg was a great director in many ways.
Wait, what movie did you talk about on some other podcast I don't want to know about?
I talked about The Post.
No, I like The Post.
Ugh, I don't know. I mean, it's entertaining, whatever. But it's like, no, Spielberg is like, I mean, I just saw Jaws again. It fucking rules.
Did you talk about how Spielberg shot The Post in like a couple months and it was essentially like a Roger Corman picture that he just rushed through just to prove that he could do it?
Yeah, and I mean, even The Post, which I think is mostly a bad movie, it's like, it's paced well, you know? The guy knows how to tell a story. And Wes Anderson I like. I mean, all I said was that I wasn't all that excited for the next one.
That's right. How dare you? Do you get angry when you listen to podcasts sometimes and people like, you know, vaguely diss something and it like stays with you every time you listen to something else?
Actually, I remember being turned off the Film Spotting podcast when they did a review where they didn't like Duck Soup. And I feel like I was never able to look at that podcast the same way again.
I remember listening to the Slate Culture Gab Fest a decade ago, and it got to the point that they would just diss like popular movies, like, ugh, no thank you, that I was like, nah, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And I haven't since then. Well, I hope that we have enough opinions on things that it doesn't make you go, I don't want to listen to this anymore, especially if you're a Patreon subscriber. Keep subscribing. We'll like whatever you like. The letter continues. "While I'm here, may I suggest an episode on the Dardenne brothers? They are amongst the most celebrated directors in the world, and I just don't get the love. Maybe it's the fact that their hyper-realistic style, following characters from the back as they walk, has been adopted by basically all independent dramas. Anyway, what do you think? Keep up the good work? Conrado."
I think they're right. I mean, I think that style, the Dardenne style, doesn't quite feel as fresh as it used to. And it doesn't feel as fresh as it used to in the Dardennes movies either, you know? I basically like the Dardennes, but I'm not all that excited to see... Like, I kind of feel like I get it at this point, you know?
Yeah, they're not filmmakers that I explored that much. I feel like if I had been around when they really hit it big in...
late 90s, early 2000s.
Maybe it would have been a bigger deal, but at this point, every new Dardenne film is like, hey, it's a new one. It's kind of like the other one, so, you know, if you like it, you like it. I could see us tackling it, talking about, you know, more neorealist stuff, which is a topic that we tend to avoid on this podcast because we like the fun things.
We should do the Dardennes at some point, though. Yeah.
Well, first we got to do like Vittorio De Sica or
actually, let's do Vittorio De Sica because he's not really a favorite of mine, but I feel like I'd like to see Bicycle Thieves again.
So our next letter is from Erwin, and it goes, "As someone who is still new to film fandom and is working frantically to learn more, I just want to say I'm so glad to have your podcast." Well, thank you. I'm slowly working my way through your archives up to episode 56, so if you read this on the podcast, I won't know for months, possibly years. And I love that you guys are never pretentious and always fun. It's great that you tell me up front whether I need to watch classics you discuss, or which movies to see from a particular director. Your discussions are always so accessible and fun. I never feel like an idiot for not knowing more about film. That's something that I do worry about when we talk about stuff like, do we just drop names and people are like, I don't know what they're talking about, and it's too much work to go looking for it.
Sometimes we hear from people who are like, oh, I like it when you do the popular directors because I don't have any context for the other stuff, which I totally understand and respect. You know, it's
we try hard to provide context, guys.
You and me, like, we will drop names like, you know, Richard Norton as if people know who that is.
And continuing the letter, most importantly, thanks to the Important Cinema Club, I finally understood a Corman reference in the Sandman comic book series. Thanks, guys, Aaron. What this letter made me think of was there a movie that you saw and suddenly you got a reference in something else? And we can't just talk about The Simpsons, because that's obviously the big one.
So I can't think of a specific example, but I do know that Looney Tunes cartoons from the 30s, any of those cartoons where it's a bunch of celebrities from the time, Hollywood steps out, I feel like I'm constantly, every couple of years making new discoveries in those.
I think that a lot of Hong Kong films can often be Magic Eye posters, especially the work of Stephen Chow, which is very in the moment and will parody stuff like commercials, music videos, or even gossip that was going on around the time. Because those Stephen Chow pictures, a lot of them were just considered disposable entertainment that someone like Wong Jing, the director, would just rush out as quickly as possible. So you get a lot of almost disaster movie spoofing. And sometimes you will have no idea and you'll just take the joke as is. But when you see stuff like Ashes of Time, you'll go, oh, I get it now. They were parodying that. Or there were, Wong Kar-wai is definitely a target that all the Hong Kong popular entertainment loves to make fun of as well.
There was one movie, I forget what it was called, but it was from the late 90s, where there was a character called Wong Jing-wai. I'll dig up what the title of that movie was. It's it's not a famous or popular movie or anything, but it was it was a character who combined the worst tendencies of both auteurs.
We said this before, but the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams film can also be like Finnegan Wake texts that, especially when you're a kid, you watch and you don't get anything. There's a whole long scene in Mafia that is just a parody of The English Patient. And as a kid, I had no idea what that was. And it's only watching it recently that I went, oh, they're supposed to be making fun of the burn makeup in The English Patient in this
There's
scene.
a movie called They Call Me Bruce from the early 80s, which is kind of like a ripoff of the Zucker Abrams movies that is, I swear, 50% commercial parodies. There's a scene where Johnny Yoon, the star of it, says, I got run over by a Toyota. Oh, what a feeling.
Well, hopefully for any listeners, we can help them provide context to jokes of their favorite films they never knew was a reference. On that note, though, just making a joke to a reference to something is so lame and serves no purpose. It doesn't really make anybody laugh.
I agree.
So, Will, big news. There's a new Gold Ninja video release, and it's one that's been a long time coming.
That's right. We are exploring the work of Edgar G. Ulmer.
Who?
The ultimate vulgar auteur. In our newest Blu-ray release, we're looking at the Poverty Row Titans 1944 film Bluebeard, starring John Carradine, one of his most atmospheric chillers, a film that brought German expressionist aesthetics to the lowest rung of Hollywood. John Carradine plays this Bluebeard lady killer in something century France.
Yeah, let's say 19th century France.
19th century France, why not? And we have an extras-packed Blu-ray. Now, remember, the Important Cinema Club Bargain Bin Classics is a public domain DVD company, but we are the criterion of public domain DVD companies. So do not expect a restored high-definition transfer of the film, but what you will get is feature-length audio commentary by Justin and myself, full of historical tidbits and analysis. You will get 3 featurettes, a discussion between Justin and I about the work of John Carradine.
It's 18 minutes long, too, so you get bang for your buck there.
It's basically a whole episode. Justin did a wonderful video essay about cinematographer Eugene Shuftan.
Yeah, when I approached this disc, I was like, Edgar G. Ulmer, we've talked about him so much. How can I find interesting stuff that we can do and talk about him? And the reality is, someone like Eugene Shuftan never gets talked about. Doing research into this video essay, he was never even interviewed in his lifetime. He won an Oscar and he did not get to pick it up. Thankfully, I found a lot of interesting information online, in nooks and crannies, and I'm going to compress it all into a visual essay. So it's basically me reciting something that I wrote, but with clips and posters to underline the points that I'm making. And someone like Shuftan, who never gets talked about as a cinematographer, even though that he worked with everybody, all of the German greats. He shot a film for Buster Keaton. He was somebody who was always on the outskirts because he could not get in the union. And the way that he ended up getting into the union, it's crazy. So we have that video featurette. And of course, we have the classic, The Best of Edgar G. Ulmer, which you can find on YouTube. But I decided to throw on here, for completionist's sake.
And hey, You love Edgar G. Ulmer. I love Edgar G. Ulmer. So why not explore some of the nooks and crannies of his filmography? There are 2 feature-length bonus films, his 1946 effort, The Wife of Monte Cristo, and his Canadian quota quickie From 9 to 9 from 1936.
From 9 to 9 is... Yeah, it's a movie.
Yeah, you can't deny that. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
I put it on here because it is one of his rarest films. You never see it anywhere, and it's really fun to see Edgar G. Ulmer shoot a movie in Montreal, set in Montreal. It's just like a Poverty Row style mystery film. And Wife of Monte Cristo is super fun because he used like all the emigre actors that he knew. It's shot by Shuftan. It's like this big gothic swordplay film about how the Count of Monte Cristo gets kidnapped and his wife has to step up and take his place. So that's really fun too. Of course, you know, every Important Cinema Club listener knows there's a hidden film on this disc as well, and it's a great one, I have to say. Liner notes by Will Sloan, and it's not written anywhere, but I'll tell you here, there are two transfers of Bluebeard on this disc. Yes, I found 2 DVDs that the transfers were different enough that one of them is very bright and it looks almost washed out, while the other one is much kind of like darker. It's more like a grindhouse print. And they both have their pros and cons, but I included both of them because I'm a completionist, and I love the idea of 2 versions of one movie on a disc.
I mean, this is amazing, folks, and it's only $10.
It's only $10. Pick it up at goldninjavideo.com. It is limited edition, 200 copies. Like I say, every time we talk about Gold Ninja Video, stuff keeps dropping out of print. So if you want to order Bluebeard, we have a whole catalog of stuff that we've done, like Edgar G. Ulmer's brother-in-arms, Frank Wisbar's Strangler of the Swamp, which we released last month and is still available on the website, so check it out.
On our Patreon this week, earlier in the podcast, we mentioned Robert Klaus, who did so many movies with Hong Kong martial arts stars in America. Well, we decided to look at the 2 movies that Jackie Chan made in the 80s that were his attempt to break into the American market. One of them is a Robert Klaus film, The Big Brawl. The other one is James Glickenhaus's The Protector. Do they hold up? Are they better than their reputations?
Do we find new things to say about these movies, which I'm sure we probably talked about in the past? Yes, we do. So listen to it at patreon.com/theimportantcinemaclub. $5 a month, you get our entire back catalog. You also get access to, next weekend, let's have another movie night on Friday at 8 p.m. I'll have more info. I'll send it to all Patreon subscribers, and I'll be posting it on Twitter and Facebook.
So next week on the podcast, we've made it over 200 episodes at this point. So I think it's finally time to do some gay porn. And we are going to be looking at probably the most famous, well, maybe not the most famous, but the most critically esteemed gay pornographer, Wakefield Poole.
So I guess we'll be watching Bijou and maybe...
Boys in the Sand?
That sounds like a good one. I have no background in this filmmaker. I've seen 1 or 2 of his films, but I'm excited to dive in.
So until next week, my name is Will Sloan.
My name is Justin the Clue. Thanks for listening. This is Justin interrupting briefly to thank some of our new Patreon subscribers, who include Adam W., Alexander Reford, Eli Osman, Diana Isokin, Brendan Murray, Old BC, and Alex Holmes. Thank you very much for becoming Patreon subscribers. We could not keep doing this without you. As I mentioned on the regular episode, if you're a Patreon subscriber, check your messages, because in the next few days I will send some info about the screening we'll be having this Friday at 8 p.m. Basically, it boils down to, if you check out the Discord, which is the chat room you get access to when you become a Patreon subscriber, I will post a link a few minutes before the show starts, and then everybody can click on that, and we'll all meet there. I'll do an intro, we'll watch the movie, you can chit-chat on the side, and we'll probably even have a little bit of a video discussion after it ends. So I hope if you're a Patreon subscriber, I will see you there. And if you haven't yet, we would really appreciate it if you could give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whatever podcast app that you use. You can follow me on Twitter at DeClueJ. You can follow Will at WillSloanESQ. We also have a Twitter account for Important Cinema Club, a Facebook group, and a Gold Ninja Video Twitter account. And if you'd like more podcast content for your ears, make sure to check me out on the Bay Street Video Podcast, which is a weekly show I do with Mark Hansen, the product product manager of Bay Street Video. Essentially, we go through like 30 to 50 new releases every week that include what's been in cinemas a few months ago, stuff that's gone direct to video, old classics being released by companies like Scream Factory or Arrow or Kino. It's a real blast. You don't really need to know anything about the movies that we're talking about because often I don't, but Mark Hansen knows probably 10 times as much as I do. So if you like discovering new movies or just want to hear people talk about ones you already know, check out the Bay Street Video podcast. And if you just want to laugh, give a listen to No Such Thing as a Bad Movie podcast, where me, April Atmansky, and Colin Cunningham every 2 weeks go through a new bad movie, I'm saying this in air quotes, and each find something that we like about it. So if it interests you, give it a listen. And now we return you to your regular scheduled programming. A lot of the times, me and Will, we won't talk about people that have passed away, only because there's probably like nothing else that we could add. Like when someone really famous dies.
Yeah, like there are so many people are dying, and like we tend to talk about them if we have some like personal connection or some thoughts, or we want to use it as an opportunity to explore the work.
But I feel like when I learned that Ted Newsom passed away, it was definitely something that me and Will could talk about. I actually like messaged Will. I'm like, oh man, Ted Newsom died. And if you're listening to this and you're like, who's Ted Newsom? Well, he was one of those like super fan people that if you get into like classic horror or even like Poverty Row, animation, Universal Monsters, you will see his name pop up in like documentaries or forewords because he was one of the authorities on those things.
And he was also a guy who you would see like in Facebook groups, on forums, a guy with a bit of a sharp tongue, a bit of a salty sense of humor. I got the sense from seeing his posts. But I think the most like significant thing he did was he did a documentary about Hammer horror where he reunited Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, like to narrate it basically. I've never seen it. I've never been like the biggest Hammer horror fan, but I know that documentary, like people brought that up a lot. He did a documentary on Ed Wood called Ed Wood Look Back in Angora, which was ubiquitous in the 90s, like in video stores, basically to cash in on the Tim Burton movie. So I saw that a lot growing up. And he also did a lot of DVD commentaries. He did commentaries with David Dakota on some of the Ed Wood movies. And he did commentaries with Bela Lugosi Jr. on releases of Devil Bat and Bowery at Midnight. So he's definitely a guy who like feels like he's been in the background for seemingly my whole life. A guy who just like pops up when I'm reading about movies or when I'm looking on the internet about movies. And he was also a filmmaker in his own right. He directed a movie called The Naked Monster, which was like a tribute to 50s horror movies that had like John Agar, Paul Marco was in it as Kelton the cop, like ton of people like that. And he co-directed Evil Spawn with Fred Olen Ray.
Yeah, so the Fred Olen Ray film, which we actually talk about at length on the Bluebeard disc, because that film features footage of John Carradine. And I should point out that the film, which was made in 1987, 88, I think Ted Newsom came in after the first version was shot and like shot new footage to be put into the movie. And then that was re-edited again, and new footage was shot by Fred Olen Ray, who was a good friend of Ted Newsom, into The Alien Within. But like in the 90s, Ted Newsom was doing like every like major documentary on stuff that was considered like, lesser. Even things like, Frankenstein, a cinematic scrapbook, Dracula, a cinematic scrapbook, Elvis. He did stuff on just, 100 years of horror. He was like one of those voices. And when you see people like him on commentary tracks, you get excited. It's like seeing David Dakota or Fred Olen Ray. It makes me go, oh, what are they going to say about these movies? Because they have a perspective that nobody else has. Because like in the 90s and the 80s, they caught the like tailwind of all of the like Poverty Row people who were still kind of hanging around, and they loved.
Yeah, they were interviewing those people. Yeah,
and they were trying to get their stories, putting them in movies. I was watching the commentary of The Alien Within, which Ted Newsom does with Fred Olen Ray, and at one point they point out, hey, look, there's like a monogram stock on the back wall, like a certificate that was an official one that you could get back in the time that they were in production. Like, that's the good stuff. Speaking of Ted Newsom, it also made me think of like, what were the other like major fans? Because, David Dakota was one of them, Fred Olen Ray.
Yeah, well, like there were certain fans who really made it their mission to like preserve the memories and go out, befriend, and like actually document the history of this stuff. So like Tom Weaver did a ton of absolutely great and essential interview books where he just talked to every B 50s horror and sci-fi person. But yeah, the darker side, I mean, there's that guy Bay Logan who
I like how you say that guy, like you are very intimately knowledgeable of Bay Logan.
Yeah, I know.
He was the guy that, like, in the 2000s, that me and Will probably will not have seen or gotten that much context out of the Hong Kong cinema scene if it wasn't for him. He worked as Hong Kong Legends, he put all those movies out, and he did hundreds of commentary tracks on all of those films.
And those commentary tracks, like, he's not great at analysis, but he's great at facts. Like, he knows he knows. I almost said he knew as if he's dead, which he may as well be. But
he may as well be.
But he knows, like, everything about everybody who's on screen. He wrote this book in the 90s called Hong Kong Action Cinema, which is a great resource. Just an incredible book. And he was involved in the Hong Kong film industry. I believe he wrote The Medallion, the Jackie Chan film.
He did, a.k.a. Highbinders.
But unfortunately, he was kind of the Harvey Weinstein of whatever he was.
He worked with Harvey Weinstein because he worked for Miramax. If you look at when some reports came out about him, they only lasted about like 2 days because that's how important figure that he was. But thankfully, like, that was it. Like, he's not working in film industry anymore. He's not doing commentaries. Like, all that stuff is over for him because, whoa boy, if you go look in those articles online, there's some real nasty stuff there.
You know what always rubbed me the wrong way about Bay Logan, and a lot of people like him. So this is a mean thing to say about someone, but he deserves it, so I don't care. Like, he seems like the kind of guy who was, like, you know, a nerd growing up, and, you know, he watched Bruce Lee movies and was like, oh, I wish I could be Bruce Lee, and then I could beat up my bullies. And, you know, then he never stopped being a nerd, but he did eventually get to the point where he was in proximity to some of his heroes, and he was in a position of minor power. And so, like, in that position of minor power, he wanted to finally strut like he was Bruce Lee. You know, it's like, oh, I finally earned this, you know? Now I can be Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, God. I mean, he was best pals with Donnie Yen. He actually fights him on the Fist of Fury TV show. He plays the white guy role in that, and he also fights Donnie Yen in Circus Kids. At the same time, like, when we talk about superfans, ones that don't have, like, that drastically, like, terrible lives, we have people like Rick Myers, who is kind of like the affable nerd when it comes to Hong Kong cinema, who I guess he was like the only US guy for a long time, and because of that, there's so much like hate by some fans where it's like, why him? Why not me?
Yeah, he was in Hong Kong in the 80s, just this white guy with a giant beard interviewing all these people who had no idea why would anybody from the West care about our movies. You know, he wrote a book called Kung Fu Cinema, but we found this thread about him on some website. It's like a 6-page or a 6-part like dossier of everything he's
more like 15 part. Yeah.
Everything he's done wrong, and you read it and it's like, oh, none of this is really bad. It's just, you know, opinions he's had and, you know, facts he got wrong.
Like,
here
he used
and
to
there.
do all the Tai Sang DVD commentary tracks, and he got dates wrong, he got actors wrong, he got movie titles wrong. It's like, yeah, that happens when you're in the moment and you're doing that. Like, me and Will do it all the time. And it's just like, what? That's so odd to me, of like, you would hate the person that, like, it's Rick Myers. He is not living in a mansion somewhere. He is probably in a 1-bedroom apartment in LA that's covered in posters that he's trying to sell.
I actually once saw Rick Myers, like in, I want to say 2012, I went to see Police Story at Lincoln Center, and I saw him there, you know, in the front row, basically. It was great to see he's still out there going to see Police Story.
He interviews Stephen Chow on the Kung Fu Hustle disc, and it's like, he was the only guy they knew in America who could talk about this stuff. I mean, I should point out that one of the greats who doesn't get talked about very much is Toby Russell. He started a martial arts magazine that, like, a lot of the information that we know is because he went out and he interviewed those people. Like, he did a whole essay on Lee So-nam, the Taiwanese director. He knew people like Robert Tai, and Toby Russell is the son of Ken Russell, who got really into Hong Kong cinema. And Toby Russell did something none of the other superfans did, is that he directed a martial arts picture with, like, you know, Taiwanese action stars called The Dada Connection that was then released. It is Not very good, but it's really interesting that like a super fan got to work with the people that were like doing the stuff that he loved, and he could do his own version of it.
Oh, that's the dream.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Rick Myers direct a porno? I remember you finding that information out.
It's a fetish film, I think. I don't know if it has any actual hardcore stuff in it. It's called Kidnapped Girls Agency. Look it up, folks.